Welcome, folks, to this week's edition of Tech Sales Advice. I am, of course, your host, Chris White, and this is the LinkedIn Live show for technical sales professionals and technical sales leaders. And as I like to say, folks, these are live conversations by design. They are unscripted, unrehearsed, and unpredictable. And this week's guest is actually someone I met in person a little less than 2 weeks ago. In fact, he and I shared the stage at SoulCon, the conference put on by Presales Collective. Not at the same time. He was on a panel earlier in the day, and then I had the chance to close out the conversation. But Tom and I really hit it off. We had a conversation after the fact, and I said, Tom, you've got to come on my show and tell your story. Folks, his name is Tom Josephson. He is a senior director of solution consulting with TCP Software. And he joins us today to talk a little bit about his journey from the classroom to customer demos and now running a sales engineering team. Tom, thank you so much for being here. How are you, my friend?
I'm doing well. Thank you for having me. I appreciate it.
Yeah, man, it's the delight. So you and I had a conversation about a week ago, and I just felt like here, as you were telling me a little bit about your story, I just thought, man, this is such a great, and it's interesting to me how many teachers turned sales engineers I've actually had on the show. So I introduced you as the senior director of solutions consulting with TCP. Do you mind telling the audience here a little bit about your journey? Let's start with, before you go all the way back.
Yeah.
Let's start with, how did you find sales engineering or pre-sales as a profession to begin with?
Yeah, honestly, it found me. And I look back on it, I got really lucky. I think about that. It was something I would never have considered. And I'm very much an evangelist for it. And whenever somebody tells me that they're looking for a new job, the first thing I try to figure out is, could you be an SC? Because to me, it was a life-changing career. I absolutely love it. And I'm still grateful to the person who found me and to that first opportunity I got, because mine was a really unique way. I think most people get into sales engineering or into solution consulting because they start out in a company, they're really good in support, really good in implementation. A salesperson or sales leader sees that and says, hey, I know I can you seem like you can be put in front of a customer. Right. Let's do it. I think almost everybody at my current at TCP Software and my last one, almost every single person, that's their origin story. Yeah. With the exception of one other person. Well, I know he started in sales, but he also was a former teacher. So mine was different. Mine was very different. I was working for a recruiting firm. So this is third-party recruiting, where sometimes it's called headhunters. You may hear that. Oh, yeah. They typically, but this was more or less for temporary work in the pharmaceutical space. Okay. And this was actually one of the first jobs I had after teaching. And I started there like the lowest of the low. I mean, it was a small company. It was only like 30 people. I basically was, if there was a mail boy, that would have been me. I wasn't quite they don't have those anymore, but that's what I was. I was officially sales support. It was more or less sales ops. And I had a boss who saw potential, and he gave me more and more opportunities, and I took on more and more responsibility. And one of the things that they were doing was, so all recruiting firms, actually all HR departments, their recruiting arm has something called an applicant tracking system, called ATS. Yep. And so they had an ATS, and for a recruiting firm, you live and die by your ATS. That has your candidates, and the ones that are built for recruiting, that are purpose built for recruiting, also have your open recs, the things that you're working on, the things that generate revenue. So this runs the business, right? And modern ATSs for recruiting firms truly do run the business. And so they were the software they were using was being sunset, and they were like, okay, we have to find new software. And I was in a part of the maybe a little bit. I don't really recall. This is some time ago now. I wasn't really a part of the evaluation process, but they decided, okay, first things first, we want to have a real CRM. And so they decided, okay, let's have Salesforce. And so they bought Salesforce, and then they're like, well, maybe there's an ATS that sits on top of Salesforce. So they found an ATS that sat on top of Salesforce. Now, my role as sales support at this time had evolved into, I was decent in Excel. I was decent. I could pick these things up, and I liked it. They said, okay, you're going to implement Salesforce. You're going to be the internal project manager for Salesforce and for this ATS that we bought that sits on top of the Salesforce platform. Yeah. And so I started working on that. I did it, and I quickly realized, and like, okay, you'll be the admin for this. And I quickly realized I was probably working myself out of a job, because now we had great software that was running the business, and it meant that there was less for me to do. Yeah. And so I started looking, and a recruiter reached out to me, and the recruiter was working on behalf recruiters. Yeah. They've been great to me in my career. They're working on behalf of another ATS, a competitor of the one that I had implemented. And they're looking for a sales engineer. I had no idea what a sales engineer was. I had no idea. I was like, could you do that? Like, yeah, I could talk all day about this. Yeah. And like, I know recruiting, which was not a lie. I know Salesforce, also not a lie. I had like a very brief stint in sales. I mean, very, very brief at that point. And it wasn't successful. And so I was like, yeah, I could do this. And that recruiter submitted me. I interviewed with them. And actually, one of the first people I interviewed with, thinking about what you were saying, a lot of former teachers, was a sales manager who was also a former teacher. And we connected on that. We're still really good friends to this day. And then, they gave me a chance. But back then, sales engineers, as they were called now, most of them are solutions consultants, solutions engineers. And back then, the norm was we didn't really do the demos. We'd just come in and sit there, and if there was a technical question that the rep couldn't answer, we would answer the question.
Interesting.
And I tell this to people on my team now, where they're doing the demos. They're doing a lot more sales than what I was doing. It was so bad, and I hate to admit this, but I will. Which was, I would multitask, and when a question came up, the reps knew to say, "Hey, Tom, they just asked."
Your ears would perk up, right?
Exactly. They just asked if you could do X, Y, and Z. I'm like, yeah, sure. Or here's how you would do it, and that was it. And thankfully for me, I started seeing a trend, which was SEs are going to have to lead their own demos. And I started to figure it out. And then I realized, like, hey, I'm going to be way more efficient at producing these demos and really fine tuning them, get them really strong, than all of the reps having to do this in addition to all of the other responsibilities they had. Yeah. And then for me, it was a small company we were working for. I started to prove myself, and the COO saw how I'd really thrown myself into refining the craft. And so I pretty much became his personal SC, and all of the big deals, we would go travel around the country and do these deals. And it got me really good. I mean, talk about pressure. It got me very good, very confident, very quickly. And so that's how I got into it. And then that company was eventually acquired by the last company I worked for. So I was in that space for quite a while.
Yeah. Yeah. And so much of the story you just shared resonates with me in so many ways. And even before I get there, I just want to say hello to our friend Amin Ibrahim. So,
hey, Amin.
We saw Amin last week, a couple weeks ago in San Francisco. He's actually been on this show as well. So, Amin, it's good to see you. And also my good friend Cliff Barcliffe, who's also been a guest on the show from Richmond, Virginia. It's good to see you guys. And if there's anybody else out there that cares to say hello, please feel free to say hello. And I'm going to apologize in advance. I just noticed my camera's bouncing. As those of you who have seen this show before, I am not in my normal habitat. I'm actually working out of a little cabin here in a few hours south of my normal habitat. So I don't have the perfect setup here, but it is good to see those of you out there. So there's a couple of things that you said that just struck a chord. First of all, you mentioned the person who hired you. So I'm still very close to the gentleman who gave me my first shot as a sales engineer 20 years ago. And in fact, a personal note, I've got a group of buddies that get together at least once a month to play cards.
Yeah.
He's one of those guys. There's 11.
Oh, wow.
And he's one of the guys in that poker group. I invited him into that group, and he and I are still friends to this day. And it's similar. I had a similar experience. You mentioned that the COO, like you became sort of the personal SE of the COO. When I went from one company to the next in like 2010, and one of my first asks, one of the first responsibilities was to do our Magic Quadrant. Every year we were involved in the enterprise architecture Magic Quadrant, and we had to do a demo, and they asked me to step in and do that. And the company had previously been like in the lower left-hand quadrant, like a niche player. And then after the demo that I assembled and delivered, we ended up being in the leadership quadrant that year. Wow. And so the CEO started carting me around whenever he had a big meeting to do. He would cart me around, just to prop me up in front of the people he wanted me to stand up in front. So those stories so resonate with me, Tom. And it's so funny. You said you got the call from a recruiter and said, well, I want you to consider, or we're looking for a sales engineer. And you thought, well, what's a sales engineer? So many have experienced that. I am curious about this.
Yeah.
You said that you had a brief stint in sales before then, and that it didn't go particularly well.
Yeah.
So when you heard that this recruiter was looking for a sales engineer, did the memory of that experience make you a little bit reluctant or unsure?
No, because at that point I'd been working for this recruiting firm for about 2 or 3 years.
Okay.
And my stint in sales was just a factory, just churning people through. Okay. And I got at this recruiting firm, I got to see what good salespeople look like. Yeah. And actually I had been considering moving into being a recruiter into the sales side, because I was like, okay, I think I could do this. Yeah. And there's definitely appeal to it, because and they were also a much more sophisticated group of sellers, which is learning from them has really, that still resonates with me. I still carry those lessons today. And so it didn't seem intimidating at that point, because what I realized is it's a lot of process. Yeah. And it's a lot of organization, which speaks to how I am. And I think it also speaks to a good SCs in general. They're really organized, or they're really thoughtful about how they prep for a demo. And when I saw that, if you have a plan, you really build out a plan and you stick to it, and the plan is something that actually works. If your plan's terrible, well, then this is something that becomes, I wouldn't want to say formulaic, but it's step by step by step. It's almost like project managing your way through it. Yeah. And so it didn't seem too bad at that point. In fact, the sales engineer, to me, in my head, when I accepted, I was like, oh, this is the stepping stone to traditional sales. And this is like sales light, which, at the time it kind of was. And then now I'm like, oh no, this is a full on sales role. Yeah. Yeah. And I was gonna invite you to take us back to the classroom, but before we go there, now that you've been in this role for a number of years, you're now managing a team of sales engineers. Yeah. Do you think you might take, quote, a step closer to the dark side and become an account executive? Or do you think the sales engineer role or profession is sort of as far as you'll go in terms of the sales career path? I don't think so. I think, and there's a couple of reasons. One, I loved being an SC. If I were to go back to being an IC, it would 100% be being an SC. And because you don't have the same grind as a salesperson,
Yep.
and if you're good at, even if you're mediocre at it sometimes, you are always the hero. You come in, you drop in, you're like the customers, the prospects love you. You show everything, you close up the deal, and you get out. You don't have to deal with the contracting. You don't have to deal with the cold calling. You don't have to deal with the like any of the price negotiate. No, you come in and you are like a superhero who's just coming in, grabbing the bank robber, tying him up, and leaving. You're not going to be going through the court proceedings. You're not going to have to be the one listening to the radio. No, you fly in, tie him up, out.
I love that analogy. I've never heard that analogy, but that is a brilliant analogy. Right. You're not the one who's sitting in the car all night long, waiting for someone to make a move. Right. And you're not the one who has to go to the jail or go to court. You're the one who flies in. You're Batman or Superman, right?
Exactly.
You catch the bad guy, you tie him up, and then you leave. I love that.
And who gets the headlines? The superhero, not the person who's booking them.
And Amin said all the fun parts of the movie. That is brilliant, guys. I've never thought about it. But you're right. I mean, we live in the middle of the funnel, right? We're not. I mean, we have some responsibility in helping to fill the funnel, and certainly we have some responsibility downstream, right? But you're right. Our primary space is right there in the middle of the funnel. So absolutely love that. I do want to invite you to just take us back to the classroom just for a moment.
Yeah.
What about being a teacher, if anything, do you think helped prepare you to be more effective as a sales engineer?
Yeah. So I actually, it helps in a number of ways. It's helped me as an SC. It's helped me as a manager. And I'll start with how it helped me as an SC. And these things are really closely linked. Is I say that my first sales job was being a teacher. So where I started teaching, it was I actually did Teach for America in New Orleans, starting in 2008. So shortly after the storm and after school started, I think it was like the second year that the schools started opening up. So
that was what, 2007?
2008.
Okay.
Yeah. So the schools were closed. Most of them were closed 2005 through 2006. Yeah. A handful opened up 2006 through 2007. 2007 is where you start having more. And 2008, the fall of 2008 is when you finally had pretty much all of the schools open. You also there were a lot of students who, because of moving and because of records being destroyed, were just out of the school system for 3 years. And so now this is the first year where they've done a fairly decent job of getting all of the school-age children back in the classroom. Yeah. And so you still have a lot of the residual effects of the hurricane. And I was teaching in Orleans Parish, which was then called the Recovery School District because the state had taken it over, which, fun fact, they'd taken it over before the storm because of its performance. Wow. And so I was teaching in arguably the most, it was the toughest school in that district, in the state that ranked 50th in the country at the time, in the district that was ranked the worst in the state. So so it was it was hard, and I won't go into specifics, but there are things that you see in there that really change your perspective on the world. So, but it was a place that if you could teach there, you cut your teeth hard, and I would say if you could teach there, you could probably teach anywhere.
Teach anywhere,
yeah. And although if you taught there, you probably wouldn't want to teach for very long. And the thing is, and my first year was a total disaster. Every teacher's first year was a total disaster. My second year was towards the end of your first year, you start to figure things out. And then some of the lessons for sales and for sales engineering is the importance of relationships. But even before that, and this is why I say it's my first sales job. When I got good at it, what I was doing well was I was selling them on my ability to get them where they needed to be. And what I
Mm.
mean by that is I didn't have, you have to manage them. You have to get them on board. And what really worked for me, and it's different for every teacher. I wouldn't say this is like the approach of every teacher. I would come in there as like, look, and I always taught high stakes courses. Most of the ones I taught, it was mostly social studies, mostly history, where they had to take an exam that they had to pass in order to get a diploma. And what I would tell them is you have, or either that one or the science one, but the science one was also really difficult. I was like, look, I will get you there. I will get you there. I'll show you how we'll get there. But if you come here, if you let me execute my plan, I will get you there. And I had the numbers to back it up. And I did. I got students, and it's still something that I see as one of my best accomplishments in my life, was getting students who I'm convinced with other teachers would not have been able to get there, and getting them a high school diploma and getting them past that. And I say it's a sales because you have very little to back up what you're claiming. And it is convincing them with everything you have that I will get you there. And that would give me the control of the classroom, which would then give me the ability to actually get them there. And so that was the first lesson. Just how do you build trust? How do you get them to understand that I'm not going to lead you astray? I'm going to put you on the right path. And the same thing. And I think I told you this. I start every discovery, and I think you win deals in discovery. I start every discovery the same way, which is I don't want to waste your time with a demo that is irrelevant to you. I want to see if what you're trying to solve for, we actually have a solution for. And if we do, we'll take a look at a demo and it'll be tailored. But I need to figure out, and that builds that trust. Like, okay, money aside, everything aside, you're here working on my behalf. And that comes from teaching. Like, I'm not here because I want to collect a paycheck. I'm not here because I have to hit these numbers. I'm here because I am legitimately invested in your success. And the same thing goes. If you can demonstrate that with the prospect, I'm legitimately invested in your success. It makes the sale far, far easier.
It aligns, and I don't know if you recall when I gave my talk a few weeks ago in San Francisco, the last three things, or the last thing I covered, was the three keys to influence, and the first of those three was priority, and demonstrating to the individuals that we're dealing with, whether it's students in a classroom or prospects in a Zoom, that they are the priority in the conversation, right? Like, there is no me without you. Right? Like, I am here for you. And that's precisely what you're talking about. And it's inspiring. And I wrote these words down because they're really powerful words, Tom. Selling them on my ability to get them where they want to be. Like, that is a quotable quote, my friend. There is so much power in that. The ability to sell an individual on my ability to get them where they are trying to go. That really defines making it all about them. So that's awesome. What else? You said that there were a couple things. So
yeah. Oh, go ahead.
No, please.
I was gonna say that's the big lesson I took from and applied to being a sales engineer or solutions consultant, and just being in sales in general. The other big lesson that I took was how to manage people. And I found I was way more successful teaching high school students. I taught at different points, 5th grade through 12th grade. And I am not a good 5th grade teacher. I am not a good 6th grade teacher. I am not a good 7th grade teacher. I could probably pass as an 8th grade teacher. 9th, 10th is my sweet spot. 11th is really good for me. And what I learned was, well, there's a couple of things. there was getting someone to trust you and allow them to manage you is a lot harder when it's not their livelihood. Like, and what it comes down to is you have to sell yourself as a leader. You have to sell. They have to understand. It's the same thing. This is actually kind of the same lesson where they have to know that I am in service of you, because if you do well, the company does well, I do well. But I know the critical point there is ensuring your success. It is, and just thinking about, just as a leader, it is always in my best interest for an employee to stay at the company as long as possible.
Yeah.
It saves the money, it saves the company money. Whatever I can do to, and I can keep you here longer is if you're successful and that helps the company and you feel successful. And I have to convince you I'm going to get there. And the other lesson from teaching is, and this is why I did a lot better with high school students, was there is this, as a teacher, and I saw this, a lot of teachers who weren't successful, they wanted to, if they said this one line, I knew they weren't going to be successful. They say, I will give you respect when you show respect. No. I have to earn your respect. I have to earn the ability. I have to earn your trust every step of the way. And every single day, every interaction I have with you, everything I'm doing on your behalf, it is re-earning that trust. And when you earn that trust and coming back to, it's the same thing. I've got your best interest in mind. It is a lot easier to lead. And when that is sincere and that comes through, and this is not something you can fake. And I think this comes from your presentation a couple of weeks ago too. You cannot fake this. You have to know in your heart of hearts, the deepest point of your gut and other parts, you have to commit to that. You have to commit to that.
Yeah. Motive is transparent, as I think I said on stage a few weeks ago, and people will see through it, right? Either you believe in some of these principles that you're sharing or not, right? And if you do, and here's the challenge. Remember, I mentioned the idea of a bummer dude. Here's the bummer dude, right? Like you're not gonna convince everybody, right? You're not gonna, but you have to be okay with that, right? And here's the other word that I wrote down, Tom, that I would love for you to reflect on, is self-awareness. I feel like you showed a lot of self-awareness, even by acknowledging, look, I'm not particularly good with the fifth graders, the sixth graders, maybe even not the seventh. For whatever reason, your skill set aligned better with 10th graders and 11th graders, probably because they're a little bit more mature, they're a little bit older, and you can talk to them a little bit more like adults, right? But the ability to have that self-awareness, how important do you think that is, either as a manager and or an SE in the field?
Oh, that's critical. And it's funny when you say self-awareness, and everybody likes to think they're self-aware. I always have this fear where I think I'm I'm self-aware, right? But if you're not actually self-aware, you have no idea. It's this weird metaphysical problem I think about. It's absolutely crucial. And when I think about it, there's some SCs. So there's a spectrum of SCs, and I think about how you coach them, and some who are different in their careers. The best are super self-aware. They know what they're doing wrong, and they know what they do right. A good manager will help them see that. A good manager will reinforce that. For example, there's an SC, one of the best SCs on the team. What I'll say is, hey, here's what you do well. You're very likable. You've got this all shucks personality, and it disarms people. And he's well aware of that. He may not have articulated it in the way I articulate it.
Right.
And I think that's on the manager to articulate, hey, this is how you are perceived. Here are your strengths. Lean into these strengths. Here are your weaknesses. And while we shore up those weaknesses, lean into what you do really, really well.
Yeah.
And so the self-awareness is important, but it's also incumbent on the manager to help identify that. And then that self-awareness has to be, okay, my manager told me this, this, and this. Do I like, is it, assuming the manager's right, how do I see that? And how do I build into that? And what I've seen, there's another SC, he's also very, very good. And I tease him because I always know that a value prop is about to come out of his mouth, because he says, and the nice thing about this is, and it is fine. It's fine. Like, I don't have a problem with that at all. I was like, do that
Right.
more. It's okay to be self-aware of that and to tell those things. That is really, really important.
Yeah.
And it's critical. And when I see it go wrong, is, and this is typically SCs newer in their career, or and there's so many factors that roll into this, where your confidence isn't quite there. It could be new in your career. It could be any number of things that have happened in your life beforehand, where you just don't have the confidence in your ability, and you're not as you don't think you're as good as you really are. And I have a few SCs I've encountered. There's someone on my team who I think could very well be the best SC. They just have to get past their own head, where they're like, well, I don't know the product as well as so-and-so. I was like, you don't need to, because you have X, Y, and Z skills that actually make you a better SC than this person that you're worried about. Now, I can't say that last part, but I'm thinking it. and it's like, if you can just get past that. So that's one end where it can be really problematic, where you're underselling yourself.
Yeah.
I see this the most, again, with newer SCs. This is the more common problem. Now, this is my favorite problem, because then I get to be a cheerleader, a coach, a manager, and that's really, really fun for me.
Yeah.
And I love building up the confidence of SCs and then watching that career grow from there.
Yeah.
And so that's a fun one. So even if they're not self-aware, and then getting them to be confident, and some of it's just maturity, career maturity, age maturity. You get there. I when somebody asks me, like, oh, what did you think of your 20s or your 30s? Like, 20s were fun, but I had no clue. and I lacked self-confidence. I lacked self-awareness. If I could have the self-confidence and self-awareness that I have now in my 20s, well, actually, it's probably best for the world that I didn't. But it would have made it a lot easier. And the same thing. And so there's some of that. So that's one side of not being self-aware. Now, the other side of not being self-aware is thinking you're better than you actually are. And I don't encounter this a lot. I don't have this at my current company. It's nice. I've seen this before. I think a lot of that comes down to insecurities, where they kind of know that they aren't as good. It's subconscious, and it manifests itself in arrogance a lot of times. And it's like, hey, I know you think, or I've been doing it this way forever, and I know it works. Well, actually, the data shows that it doesn't. And that's a harder approach. And that one, which is funny, I see this more not from SCs, more from salespeople. Like, well, in my last company, I did this, and I had success. I was like, yeah, but it was a different product, and it was a different, there's all these in different markets or different whatever. And the most common thing is like, oh, I used to do all of my own discoveries by myself, and it was fine. It's like, yes, and there's a number of reasons why that was the case, but trust me and just bring an SC along. And usually, if they have an open mind, they'll let the SC assist them. But a lot of it is like, I've been doing it this way for a long time, and that's harder. And and you even encounter that with people who are not necessarily arrogant or insecure, just people who've been doing it, or they've had success in this. And that one's a little bit difficult. The way I would usually approach that is, okay, I get that. I want you to just try one of these strategies, and we build up to it. And what I tell people is, I have a path that I want them to take when they demo, but I also say this very critical line, and this helps with this group. I'm going to give you tools to be a better SC. I do not want every SC demoing the same way. I don't want SE robots. I don't think you should demo the way I demo because this works for me. And this comes back to knowing your strengths, knowing your weaknesses, lean into your strengths, shore up your weaknesses. And so like, here's some tools. This might feel awkward for you. Some of them might feel awkward because they're new. Some of it might feel awkward because this isn't your style. Don't force it.
Yeah.
Take some lessons and apply it.
Yeah. Yeah. It's good. It's interesting. I was having a conversation with a gentleman earlier this week, actually, and we were talking about something similar. And he actually shared this idea with me, which I absolutely loved. And it's similar to what you're saying. He said, what I like to tell my folks is they're tools, not rules.
Oh, that's good.
Isn't that good?
That's
Meaning
good.
you're the tools and you can use the tools however you want to, but they're not rule. I'm not telling you how to do it.
I like that a lot.
Right. And you know, the other thing, there were two other thoughts that came to mind. And then Cliff asked a question. Actually, I think he asked a couple questions, which we may touch on. But there were two other things that came to mind as you were speaking. The first is this idea, you know, you said, you know, I think I'm self-aware, but how do I know if I'm self-aware? But here's the interesting thing. When we run leadership training programs, one of the things that this little exercise that we do is we invite everybody to ask themselves, what's your sign? And people say, well, what do you mean by what's your sign? And we say, and we take like a Post-it, you know, like a Post-it pad. And we say, imagine you've got a Post-it note on your head and there's some characteristic that everybody else can see, but you can't. That's your sign. And basically what it is and we all have it. We all have something that is kind of obvious to everyone, but we just don't necessarily see it or don't necessarily recognize it all the time.
Yeah.
And it's, you know, it's sometimes you have to turn to the people who know you the best, whether it's, you know, your close friends, your spouse, your partner, your close colleagues. And like, I know for me, and I hate to admit it, but I can admit it to you and the rest of the world on this, you know, public, you know, platform. I'm very competitive. I'm just very competitive. And in frankly, all elements of life. And it's obvious to my friends. Now I don't necessarily like to admit that all the time. And I probably don't think about that very often, but you know, so that like, so the interesting thing is we all have a blind spot, right? We all have at least one thing that other people pretty frequently or you know, they see it, but we don't necessarily see it. So in any event, I just, and the other thought that I had, and this is such an interesting one. You mentioned that, you know, you feel like there are some SEs that maybe don't have maybe quite the confidence. And so they sort of make up for it with arrogance, which by the way, was exactly what I was thinking. But it's such a fine line, isn't it? Because we want SEs, and I've literally had some SE leaders say, Chris, I need you to help my folks have a little bit more bravado or have a little bit, like walk into a meeting with a little bit more confidence. But on the flip side, it can't be arrogance, right? So we need to strike that fine line between a touch of modesty, a touch of look, I don't have all the answers, right? But we do have to be confident in ourselves, confident in our solutions, confident in our expertise, right? Yeah. So we need to strike a fine line there. So it's a constant balancing act. Now, Cliff, I'm sorry, were you going to say something?
Yeah, to that end, there's something I tell SCs who are not quite there with the confidence. Actually, I'm also comfortable telling this to SCs who are confident too, which is, this is what I tell myself before any demo I have. I write it on a Post-it note and I put it on my screen right before, and then right before the demo, I'll take it off and I'll keep it in front of me. And it is a note that says, right now, there is no one better on this planet to deliver this demo. And it's not true. You know, I've prepared for it. I know this. I'm going to be, and it's just, and in those moments of insecurity or self-doubt, looking down at that, it's like, it doesn't, you could put any other human being here and they would not do a better job than what I'm about to do.
Yeah.
And just remembering it, it's not, and it just like, it realigns my mindset and that's it.
Well, and so that's actually a perfect segue into Cliff's the question that Cliff just asked. And by the way, let me just push pause for a moment, folks. I'm speaking to Tom Josephson. He is a senior director of solutions consulting with TCP Software. If you do have any comments or questions, please feel free to chime in. We don't see who's out there, so if you just care to say hello, please do. So Cliff just asked, how can the SE who is very experienced not come across too self-assured, which is sort of what you were just like, you're trying to build yourself up, right? And so how have you found for yourself that balance, and or how do you encourage maybe some of your folks to find that balance? Cliff, thanks for the question.
Yeah, so I want to be clear that I'm answering the right question. So someone who is really experienced, not coming off as arrogant or too self-assured,
too arrogant, too full of themselves.
I think in one way that really works is getting them to, when they introduce themselves, how they introduce themselves. Some of our more confident SCs, and this is something they just they figure this out on their own. And so I've learned this from them, and this is how I would probably coach people. So a lot of them came from implementation or support. And even though these are like top-notch SCs, they're doing it for years. They've been SCs for like close to 10 years, and they're really, really good. And there's one, he'll say, I'm a support nerd, and they told me that when they approached me about this job, they said I get to talk about time and attendance in front of people, and I love it. So that's what I do. So they'll say like I'm a principal SC. That's funny. They'll start with I'm a principal SC, which is just a fancy title for a support nerd who really likes talking about the software in front of prospects. And I love that because it hasn't undermined their ability. I'm a principal SC. I know this inside and out. But for me, I'm here because I just love the solution. And it's I think that's and it disarms the people. So to the point where you can get away with a lot of arrogance without but they've been disarmed out of the gate. So that would be one strategy. And this is a tough question. I wish I had I think the other way is how they answer questions too. Like, are you coming off as I know this, you don't? And one way to soften that is, and I've seen SCs do this, like, be consultative, which is, there's a number of different ways to do this, and y'all have your special ways. I know your business is unique. Here's what I would recommend. And what do you think about that? And what's wrong with this? Actually, I'm stealing this question from you. What's wrong with this process, considering how you all do it today? 99% of the time, they're going to be right with their answer. And this was really hard for me, and hard for a lot of people, as when you've been demoing a product in the same industry for 3-4 years, every prospect is like, oh no, we're unique. And yet, actually, yes, you're unique, but are you unique because you have a process that you are trying to work around something, and I'm giving you something that's revolutionary and I know it will work better, even though like 90% of the customers are using it, and you feel unique. How do you bridge that gap? And being able to bridge that gap without saying, oh, you're an idiot for not trusting me. It is hard. And I think a lot of it is coming from that consultative piece. Like, hey, there's a couple different ways to do this. This would be my recommendation, but I know your process is unique. How does this fit in? What did I get wrong?
Yeah. It's when you talk about answering the way in which we answer questions, and I don't recall if you've finished my book or not, read my book or not, but I talk a lot. I talk a lot about the way in which we answer questions. I actually believe, for starters, I believe that the way in which we answer questions usually makes or breaks a deal. Period.
Interesting.
Right? I mean, that's just why? Because nobody's ever bought anything without asking questions. And if they're not asking questions, they're not interested in the solution. right? So if there's any chance that they're actually going to invest in your solution, they're going to ask questions. And the way in which we respond to those questions, again, in my opinion, usually it's not the demo, it's usually how we answer the questions that ultimately decides the outcome. But to your point, I think it also ultimately dictates their perception of us.
Yes. Yes.
Do we come across as arrogant? Do we come across as condescending? Or do we come across as sincerely curious, sincerely interested, and trying to sincerely help them make the best decision? So I just absolutely love that. The other thought that I had, and going back to Cliff's question, another post-it that I think we can put on the screen, sort of to follow that frame of mind or that practice, is sort of to counterbalance, like, there's nobody better than you or nobody more well-equipped than you to give this demo. But I think if we also remind ourselves, it's not about me.
No. Yeah. Yeah.
Do you follow me? It's actually not about, and I think that takes a lot of pressure off of us. Like, it's actually not about you, and it's not, it's about them.
It's about their problem.
Our mindset is, look, we are simply here to be helpful. We have some good ideas. We're excited to show you our solution. But at the end of the day, we're just trying to really understand what you're trying to accomplish. And we're going to help you understand how we believe our solution will help you achieve that, right? Yep. To me, that is completely and totally game-changing. So I absolutely love this.
There's one thing I want to add. It made me think of it. Another way to soften that self-assuredness is and coming back to those questions, when they ask a question, ask follow-up questions.
100%.
Get clarification, because then that also shows a bit of vulnerability where I don't know the answer. I'm not really sure what you're asking. And I tell SEs to ask clarifying questions, because just because you hear it one way doesn't mean that's what they intended. Really figure out the intent of that question. It might be easier to answer than you think. But then you're also inquisitive. You're showing that you're interested in that problem. And coming back to what you said, recentering it on them. And it shows a degree of vulnerability and humility that I think are critical.
Yeah. Well, and at the end of the day, when somebody's asked a question, usually there's the real question is somewhere buried beneath the question, right? And I tell people all the time, like, and it's sort of what I would call a disruptive truth, or sort of a confusing idea. One of the big mistakes that we make as SEs sometimes is answer the question, right? Like, we're so quick to demonstrate how smart we are, and how clever we are. So we hear a question like, "Oh, let me slow down," right? Like, first of all, make sure you understand the question. Ask why. May I ask? Thanks for your question. Happy to elaborate. May I ask why it is you're concerned about that? Right? Now they're going to give you and the truth is maybe it's something completely and totally different. Right.
Yeah. I also really like that. Actually, it makes me think of another thing. One of the biggest mistakes, especially if somebody's coming from a different part of the organization and really knows the software, they over answer. It's like, hey, are you able to do X? Yes, let me show you. And then they get into like admin tools that look horrible and should never be demoed, but they're so excited to demonstrate that it can do it. And it sometimes really hamstrings you. It makes the product look worse.
Well, not only that, but I've seen this countless times. After 10 minutes of click, 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 the person who asked the question says, "So the answer was yes."
Yeah.
and we realized that we didn't need to go any further than the yes, right?
Yeah. I tell them, just say yes. If they push you on it, be as nonchalant. Oh yeah, here's how you do it.
Exactly.
And then every other yes you say, they trust.
Amen. Awesome. Tom, let me push our pause button again just for a moment, folks. I'm speaking to Tom Josephson. We're going to wrap up here in just a few minutes. So if you have any comments or questions before we close up, please feel free to put them in the chat. Tom, believe it or not, we've been at this for 50 minutes, and you and I both have another meeting that we have to go to. So we're gonna have to wrap up a few minutes early. As I like to say, the landing gear is out, the runway is in sight. we're going to land this plane a minute or two early. We have sort of bounced all over the place, which is the way these conversations are intended to go. Was there anything else that you felt inspired to share, sort of just as you reflect on your journey? And you're a teacher, then you got into recruiting. You ended up implementing their ATS system, which integrated with Salesforce, and then you were recruited by a competitor. Got into this crazy profession called sales engineering, not really knowing what it is. And now here you are running a team. As you reflect on your career, is there one common thread or one common theme that you feel really best represents your success through each of those stages?
Yeah, I did not expect this. I had to think about this for a moment. I think if I had to sum it up, or like where I've had my most successes, when there were opportunities to take on more responsibility, and sometimes I had to ask for it or I had to seek it out, that has always accelerated my career. And there's sometimes where it's like, oh, Tom, you probably shouldn't be doing that, and I'll get reeled back in. But most of the time, if there's an opportunity to take more responsibility, it is a great accelerator.
Yeah. I so love that answer. And particularly in today's workplace, I feel like there's a lot of people, and I feel like that this is more prevalent in the younger generation, that I think people are expecting to be paid more before they necessarily go and do more.
Yeah.
And what I hear you saying is you didn't necessarily look at it like, well, I want to be paid more. You just went and sought more responsibility. And I just think there's such a valuable lesson there. I sincerely do believe that if you do more, you're going to get paid more.
Yeah, it comes. It may not be like day one.
It may not be immediate, right?
And it may not be your current company.
Exactly. I remember this story. So I used to listen to Zig Ziglar all the time when I was in my 20s. And Zig Ziglar, he used to tell this story about this store owner that used to watch this employee of the store, the competing store across the street from him. Yeah. And that he said that the story was the store owner just watched this young man running back and forth and doing all these things and helping customers, always moving. And the store owner said to his colleague or to his partner, you see that employee who works at that store across the street? He's going to get a raise. And his colleague said, well, how do you know he's going to get a raise? Well, you see how hard he works? If his boss doesn't give him a raise, I'm gonna. Right? Yep. And that's the point.
Yeah.
The more you do, the more you will get paid. If not by your current employer, by another employer at some of the time. And Tom, as I reflect on my career, and I'm a little bit older than you, and I say that, tongue in cheek, but every time I got a new job, the one thing I always looked for was the biggest problem or the biggest challenge that nobody wanted to tackle.
Yeah,
and
I like that.
I always raised my hand and said, I will, whether it was a big technology challenge or an architecture challenge or an organizational challenge or a customer challenge, whatever it is, I always wanted to climb the steepest hill because I knew, first of all, that's just my personality. I'm a problem
competitiveness,
solver, big challenges.
I can do it. No one else can.
But all jobs are problems. So I love that response from you, that you always looked for the opportunity to do more and take on more responsibility.
Yeah.
Such a good thread.
Thanks. Yeah. And even if I'm looking at opportunities, if the times where I've looked at a career or making a career move, is this going to get, yes, pay is nice, but am I going to have more influence? Am I going to be able to acquire more skills where, pay may be a trade-off, but is this going to improve my career, broadly speaking?
Yeah.
Like, that's something I always consider.
Yeah. Yeah. And can I make a larger impact? Right.
Exactly.
And I believe, and I may have said this the other day, I believe that we are all most fulfilled when serving other people. So the more we can look for opportunities to make an impact and serve other people, the more fulfilled we will be. And frankly, the better paid we will be. So awesome. Tom, it has been a delight. I didn't know you from Adam about 2 weeks ago. And here it is. You've been on my show. I enjoy talking to you.
Yeah, this is a lot of fun.
I appreciate you being here. Any final thoughts from you as we wrap things up?
Actually, yeah, you remind me of something with what you said, which is something that I tell new managers who have been ICs as an SC for like individual contributors and now moving into management, where the hardest thing, but also the most rewarding thing is when you win a deal, you get this quick and endorphin rush. I think it's and you just get one after another, and that's the appeal of being an SC. However, when you move into leadership, you're not going to get those anymore. But instead, you're going to get this long, slow burn. You're going to watch people's careers grow. You're going to see somebody who came on, was green, rough around the edges, and now is the best in the organization. And while that took years to come to fruition, it will be the most rewarding part. But you have to be patient. And you have to wait and be ready for it.
Yeah. It's awesome. That's really well said. You got to learn to play the long game, right?
Yeah. Which is hard.
Indeed. Awesome. Tom, thank you so much for being here, sir. You and I both have meetings to go to. So if you've got just one more minute, hang around backstage just for a second so I can say a proper goodbye to you. For those of you who hung around, folks, thank you so much for being here. If you caught the recording, thank you so much for sticking around this long. If you care to be alerted to these, you can always follow #TechSalesAdvice. Of course, you can go to techsalesmastery.com to learn a little bit more about what we do. And Tom, fair to say that you would welcome people to connect with you on LinkedIn?
Absolutely. Please do.
Fabulous. Awesome. Folks, thank you so much. We will see you
for having me.
At the next Tech Sales Advice. Tom, thank you for being here.
Thank you.
That was awesome.